Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Well, John, we're back again this week in studio together. We got a lovely little plexiglass screen between us, masks and whatnot. And we're going to talk a little bit about high school football just right off the rip. The Glasgow Scotties they hosted Christian Academy of Louisville on Friday night in the regional round, I guess is what it's called. It's hard for me to keep track of is this the regional final? I guess it is.
Or quarterfinals of the state.
Yeah, I mean, however you want to mark it up there. That was the Class 3A quarterfinals at the state. I like that. And I'm going to tell you, outside of basically three plays, and I don't even count the last touchdown by Cal in this game, outside of three plays, Glasgow controlled that game. I mean, they did all of the things I think they wanted to do, or at least what Coach Jeff Garman said they set out to do, but for three plays. Basically, the first one, they scored first, but they were only up 6-0 because he had a botched mishandled snap on their extra point. They tried to get the 2-point play out of that, but it didn't work. That came back to hurt them later just because the score of the game would have been tied, but they were down one. And then two pass plays right before halftime, like in a minute and 23 seconds. I mean, it was a wild finish to the first half. And Cal hit two big touchdown passes. Glasgow had a big touchdown pass as well, which I'll tell you more about that play here in a little bit. But and both those passes went to Cal's number one receiver, Easton Messer. He finished with 200 and something yards of receiving on 6 catches, but I think a little over 100 of that was on those two plays. And I really don't know what happened on those two plays. It was just he was wide open on both of them, basically. And outside of that, I mean, Glasgow did what they wanted to do. They shut down Cal's running game. Other than those two plays, they pretty much contained their passing game in terms of like giving up yardage. They ran the ball effectively. Got a big game out of Jamarian Long there, both receiving and running. And in the end, they lost 28-20. Like I said, I don't even count the last score. I mean, basically, the final score of the game was 21-20 when you get down to the brass tacks of it, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to give Glasgow a lot of credit. They played, I think you can arguably say that it was the best game they played all year.
Yeah.
And clearly, you got to give Glasgow a lot of credit. Coaching staff, players, they were playing their best at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it has to do with probably the change in offense and the philosophy. It took them a while to kind of get used to the wing tee. But, man, they went head to toe with Christian Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, you just mentioned it, but the last 2 minutes of the first half, everything just kind of like broke out. And yeah. In high school, oftentimes it's hard to score once in the last 2 minutes of the first half. And they broke through with two long pass plays. And this Messer kid, he kind of looked like Tyreek Hill of Kansas City, to be honest with you.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he broke wide open several times, and Glasgow's got a good secondary too.
Mm-hmm.
I think his speed probably surprised him a little bit. You go, well, how do you let that happen? Well, I mean, I watched Kansas City play, and Tyreek Hill plays against paid professional cornerbacks, and he gets behind people.
Yeah.
I watched the New York Jets somehow lose the game on the last play of the game yesterday on a 40-something yard bomb, in which they let somebody get behind them. So these things happen. You give him and the quarterback credit, but it was a really, really a fantastic showing by the Scotties, and Jay Long had close to 160 yards, I believe.
Yeah.
One of the things that Christian Academy tried to do is they tried to take away the fullback.
They did,
and
yes.
That's you have some option when you play against a wing T team. Sometimes you'll try to take away the inside, which would be the fullback, and other times you may want to take away maybe speed on the outside, where they concentrated on stopping the inside run. And they were fairly effective at that, but man, it opened up things for Jay Long. Also, a touchdown pass, I believe, earlier in the game too, by the Scotties. Well played. Went down to the end, and if you're Glasgow, you you can't have a whole lot of regrets. It's not like, well, if I could have done this or whatever. I think they played their best game of the year.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And Garmin had mentioned after the game that when they play folks, those teams they usually play, pick which one they want to try to take away. And so, yes, Cal did focus on stopping Kieran Stockton up the middle and focus on –
who had the big game the week before.
Yes, and so that did open up things on the outside for Long. Back to those touchdowns, here's the other thing about that. The first touchdown pass, I think, was 73 yards. And
Post pattern right down the middle of the field, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so Glasgow had controlled the ball, gotten down to Cal's side of the field again. At that point, they were down 7-6 at that point. And so they went for it and weren't able to convert it. And I guess Cal did probably what you should do in that situation. Try to hit a home run, try to catch them flat-footed, and it worked. And then Glasgow came right back.
And scored.
Yeah, and scored. And the funny thing about the pass was Easton Jesse threw the pass, and it was going to be a little bit short.
Yeah, and the Glasgow receiver undercut the throw.
Yeah.
Basically took it away from the safety.
Yeah, the Long just cut right in front of it. Because when the ball was in the air, I saw it coming, and the safety was just hanging out waiting for it. And I was like, good grief, this is going to be intercepted. And Long was on the outside, and he cut in and just took the ball right out.
Yeah, great play. And you would have thought that would have ended the half, because I think there was only like a 40-something seconds left in the half, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And Christian Academy gets it again, and again another touchdown pass to Messer, right?
Yep, that's right. And so it was just a wild finish. And so Glasgow went in at halftime down 21-13
with the momentum shifting to Christian Academy.
Yeah, but then the Scotties came back out in the second half, and they really dominated the second half. They got a touchdown. They'd gone for a 2-point conversion, and they didn't get it initially.
And when you said earlier that the last touchdown didn't really not going to really count that, what you meant is that Christian Academy probably made a mistake by scoring the last touchdown, which is less than probably it was like a minute to go on the clock, and Glasgow basically just allowed them to rush it in, which was a smart play by Glasgow, because if Christian Academy had just taken a knee or a couple of knees or maybe just kind of run into the line and fell down, they probably would have been, if any time left on the clock, you're talking about probably 20 seconds or less.
Yeah.
But Glasgow kind of let them score, which gave the Scotties an opportunity. Now, listen, they didn't have any timeouts, but gave them at least a chance to, who knows, to make a big play.
Yeah, I said they were actually down 21-12 at halftime, and then they got that touchdown, got a 2-point conversion to make it 21-20. But you're right. So what had happened was Cal took a knee. Glasgow had one timeout left. They called it. Cal ran a play for whatever reason, gave it to the Brandt kid, their running back, and he scored the touchdown. And that allowed the Scotties to get that ball back with the score 28-20. And on the sideline,
that's good if you have him in fantasy football.
Yeah,
but that's really not good strategy on Cal's part.
Yeah, he must not have been watching some of these games this year in the NFL where people fell down at the goal line or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, so Glasgow did get an opportunity there, down 28-20 to try to come back. They got a sack on fourth down. They weren't able to pull it off. One of the things that I asked Garmin about after the game, and he made this point, and I thought it was a good point because we had talked about this a little bit last week. Easton Jesse, the freshman's been playing quarterback because John Carter Myers was hurt. John Carter Myers comes back. He's available at the Taylor County game, only plays defense. And then they used him some at quarterback in the game against Cal. And I asked Garmin, after the game about, using Myers more at quarterback, that kind of thing. And he said, one of the things probably didn't really register to people is that he missed 8 weeks.
Yeah.
His conditioning isn't where it needs to be, and we didn't want to use him too much. We wanted to use him some. But they primarily still use him on defense, which is probably smart as well because, as we've talked about before, he's a great defensive player.
He is a great defensive player, and they had kind of gotten to a rhythm offensively as well. So I thought it was smart how they handled that.
Yeah. So, 7 seniors, I think, is what Glasgow has.
That's a small class.
It is a small class. Some critical players in that group, like Carter McKeever, Mason Bragg, Tad Shelton, Jaden Wood, Cameron Deckard, some linemen. A lot of those guys are defensive players. They're going to miss them on the defensive side because they've had big careers with Glasgow. But when you get down to it, they're basically bringing back a lot of the talent.
Yep.
And so this year they probably played
almost all their skilled players.
Yeah, almost all their skill players. This year, I would say, I think we talked about this at the beginning. It was kind of a gap year in a way for Glasgow because they had a good junior class that's there, and they probably did maybe better in a lot of ways than people expected them to.
Yeah.
With what they had lost last year, with the fact they had a bunch of
overcoming
juniors.
the injury in the middle of the year. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think it was an extremely successful year.
Yeah.
I mean, I was surprised when they knocked off Taylor County.
Right.
I felt like that was a good win. And how competitive they were with Cal was even more impressive. I would give Glasgow an A this year.
Yeah, I thought they did a really good job. I mean, it's we've talked about the adversity to the teams because of the nature of this season, and what the message from coaches and that kind of thing to their players for this season. And it felt like to me during the course of this season, the coaching staff at Glasgow, just everything around their program, did a really good job of keeping those kids focused. They missed, I think, twice. They had 2 different games get canceled, the Caldwell County game, Adair County twice, so they ended up missing 3 games out of all that that they didn't get to play because of those cancellations. And, they had the gap week where the playoffs didn't start. I mean, it had to be hard to keep the players focused on what they needed to do day in and day out with all the challenges around them.
No, it's hard for everybody.
Yes, exactly.
It's a tough year for all those concerned, whether you're playing football or basketball or whatever. But, they managed that about as well as you could manage it.
Yeah. And so I thought it was I feel like everybody should have a positive feeling about the season. I'm sure there are always people who think you should go further and do better or whatever. But, I mean, the bottom line is I actually thought Glasgow did better than I expected them to this year based on what we just discussed, the number of juniors, that kind of thing, small senior class, etc.
I agree.
All right, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, we mentioned this last week, and I think you and I both believe that the WKU Hilltoppers, when they played Louisville, would have a good chance to win that game and probably should be considered the favorite in the game, considering Louisville having a number of players who were sidelined. Mm-hmm. But WKU went to the KFC Yum Center and really did not play well at all, especially when it came to the ball handling side of things. They had 21 turnovers in the game, and that was just odd considering how well they had done in that particular area the week before.
I've made this mistake in the past in here where I have really kind of bragged on the toppers that I thought they were legitimately good and top 25 and this and that, and I've been bitten in the derriere a couple times over that, and it was a terrible performance on national TV, and I think a lot of people that are Topper fans in this area really thought, the time is right to beat Louisville. Yeah, and in fact, I think you can argue that Western probably has better players than Louisville does at the time, but the game wasn't close.
No.
And they looked bad. The 21 turnovers was bad. They kind of, and in one sense, gave up in the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game, did not have a lot of fight in them, and it was disappointing. Now, let me defend them. I will defend them. I still think they're really good. The defense will be they were in South Dakota for I think 4 days.
Yeah,
played 3 games out there and flew directly back from South Dakota to Louisville, and they have stayed in a hotel for probably 10 straight days. Mm-hmm. And I think after a while you get stale, and I think just staying in a hotel over and over and over, you probably get a little tired. And they played like, to me, a tired team.
Yeah,
and that's not really an excuse. I'm just kind of giving you a reason. Mm-hmm. And I think they're a lot better than that. And the problem with that for Western is, even in a pandemic year, schools such as Western, you only have so many chances to impress the NCAA committee.
Yeah,
and when you have an opportunity to take down a Louisville program or a West Virginia program in which they had a chance to, and then you don't, that really hurts your chances at the end of the year unless you win your conference. And they had two situations, West Virginia, in which they were up double digits in the second half. They couldn't finish. And then Louisville was there for the taking, and they kind of laid an egg.
Well, and, I think the selection committee, the NCAA selection committee, tournament committee, that kind of thing, could look at the West Virginia game and say, okay, that's fair enough that WKU lost that game. They were competitive. That's kind of what you're looking for.
If they give you, I don't even know if they give you the benefit of the doubt anymore. You either win or you lose. When you're in Western's position or whoever, they just look. Okay, well, did you win? No. Okay, well, no credit.
Well, that's probably true.
Unfortunately, that's unfortunate.
That's probably true. And this year is going to be really interesting to see how all this kind of pans out when we get to this.
But a 21-point loss, there's not much you can say.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the score. Louisville's not ranked. I mean, they are 4-0, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, they're ranked now. They're 25th.
Okay, so they're ranked now off of beating WKU, I guess, basically in Seton Hall. But you look at that, and Louisville's not projected to be one of the better teams in the ACC this year, and so the question is going to be when you get to talking about that selection, you get to the end of the year. Is it more impressive what Louisville accomplishes during the course of this season, and then WKU maybe gains some benefit out of that whenever they look at those RPI rankings and stuff that they do? Or, is it, Louisville at the end of the year is Louisville everybody thought they were going to be to start with, and then that's even more damaging to WKU?
Well, if Western does not win their tournament, they're going to look at their out-of-conference schedule, and they're going to try to find wins.
Yeah.
And, where are they? I mean, they beat a good Northern Iowa team, and they beat Memphis. Memphis may end up being good. I don't know if they will or not, but I'm just saying, though that's the unfortunate part to being in the position that Western's in.
Yeah.
I think it's wrong to be in that position. I think you should be able to judge teams and watch teams, but that I'm just saying they had an opportunity. And that same opportunity, if it's vice versa, if Louisville had been in South Dakota and flew back and lost to Western, it would not hurt Louisville as much as it hurts Western when it comes to the end of the year.
Yeah, that's because they assume that Louisville's going to play a tougher conference schedule.
Because Louisville's going to get 15 more opportunities.
Yeah.
Duke, North Carolina State, Virginia twice. They're going to get all those chances, and Western's just not going to have quite as many chances to get those marquee victories.
You know what's interesting? When you look at WKU's first 4 games, as it turns out, they could have played 4 tournament-bound teams in their first 4 games.
That's correct.
Depending on how things shake out. Because Northern Iowa and Memphis both could win their conferences.
That's correct.
And West Virginia and Louisville could get in by virtue of the conferences they in.
Well, I think West Virginia is a legit team. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's kind of a fascinating thought, too, on that particular front. But meanwhile, Louisville is supposed to play Wisconsin on Wednesday. Probably that game's going to be postponed from some things I was reading earlier today.
I think Louisville has a COVID case or whatever. And,
it was discovered the day after the game with WKU.
Yeah,
right?
They haven't had a practice yet, so I would be surprised if they play.
Yeah, and so then we don't necessarily get to learn anything more about them. I think Wisconsin's ranked number 3 at the moment, typically a good team. Meanwhile, the Kentucky Wildcats are – this is the worst start for a Kentucky team, I think, what I was reading since 2007, Billy Gillespie's last year.
1-3, lost 3 straight.
Yeah, lost 3 straight. They're not ranked and got no votes. I think that was it for the first time since 2007, 2008.
They don't deserve to be.
No, I mean, they're not good at the moment.
No, I mean, you can make an argument that the Richmond is a good team, so experienced team. Kansas is Kansas, though I don't think it's a great Kansas team, but still, it's a neutral site Kansas game, and they didn't play bad against Kansas.
Right.
Georgia Tech was 0-2.
And Georgia Tech beat them like they were supposed to be the one winning that game.
Georgia Tech hammered Kentucky, to be honest with you, and the 2 losses to Georgia Tech were teams that. Off the top, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they lost to 2 teams.
Did they lose to Gardner Webb or somebody?
Well, they weren't Power 5 teams.
Yeah.
So I mean, let's just be real. Kentucky does not look good now. Am I going to write them off? No, because Calipari does this. He doesn't do this every year in terms of 1-3, but his teams obviously get better. I mean, when you start off. New players, every player is either a first-year transfer or they're a first-year player, freshman.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to get better, and, they've got they got good players. I mean, Terrence Clark is really good, and the Boston kid are probably both first-round draft picks. So they're going to get better.
Right.
The problem is that their point guard play is not real good right now. In fact, it's bad.
They might as well not have a point guard.
Well, they had 21. They had 21 turnovers against Georgia Tech, who played a zone the whole game. I mean, it's not, they didn't get pressed. I mean, that's bad. And they turned it over 18, 19 times against Kansas. And it's not just they turn it over; they're not creating any assists either.
Yeah.
So they got a problem at the point guard position. Between Eskew and I think Mertz. And I've yet to see Cal have a really, really strong team at UK without a good point guard.
Yeah.
And, most teams struggle without a good point guard. But he normally, that's where he really can go find them. And the last time they did not have a quality point guard, they went to the NIT.
Yeah, this is looking like that NIT team in a lot of ways.
I don't think so. I think they'll get it somewhat corrected, but they're going to have to pick the pace up right now because they're not playing very well. Their shooting has not been that good, but they shot the ball better against Georgia Tech. I think they were 8 out of 17 from 3.
Yeah.
Terrence Clark shot it good from 3, and so did Boston. So that was a concern. And
But you did just point out Georgia Tech played a zone.
They
which
did.
Leaves that shot open.
It does, and I don't think they have great shooters. So, I'm just I would be concerned if I were a Kentucky fan. I just don't – have never been real – I just have to be fair. I'm not crazy about taking brand new players every year. It's the same old thing with with Kentucky and Duke's that way too. You got to rely on so many first year players and freshmen, so you never get a chance to really know who these kids are and so forth.
Yeah,
I've never been a big fan of that, to be perfectly honest with you. But it's ugly right now. I mean, I listened to some of the call-in show last night after the game, and there were people I've never heard this for Cal. There were 2 or 3 callers that just said it's time for him to go. That he's the game is changed. It's past him. He's got to accept that 3-point shooting is part of the game, and blah blah blah. And I went, whoa, that's I think that's a little extreme. I don't think the game's past him, but. There's some frustrated people.
I did point out that comparison to Billy Gillespie's short tenure at Kentucky on purpose because that is a pretty ugly place to be if you're John Calipari, to be your team to be compared to something that Billy Gillespie had while he was there. But the other thing that kind of is annoying, and it's got to be annoying for Kentucky fans, is Calipari's whining about everything that's going wrong for him. I'm like, it's the same for everybody. Why are you crying about it?
I don't know. It's that's another
It's beneath
part.
him.
Yeah, well, but he's done. That's consistent. I mean, it's he made the schedule out. He's complaining that the schedule was too tough. And they didn't have exhibition games, and they didn't get a chance to play Camelsville and Austin Peay and some of those. So. But Georgia Tech's not very good.
It should have been an exhibition game for Kentucky in a lot of ways.
Playing Richmond, come on now. I mean, that's most people are just not going to buy into the fact that Kentucky's schedule is too hard. And then the bus trip, it's the first time he'd been on a 7-hour bus trip for forever. He mentioned that. And I'm going, come on now. It's just you start to sound a little bit on the spoiled side when you go down those routes.
Yeah, you do kind of reveal how much luxury Kentucky basketball actually gets, and how much leeway it gets to do the things that he wants to do. And he runs into a little bit of hardship, and his team doesn't perform well.
And he talked about the crowd, not having a crowd at home that has, in the past has picked up his team when they need it. And it's just, everybody goes through that right now.
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of saying I'm not a very good in-game coach in a lot of ways because of the complaints he's actually laying out there.
Yeah, I think it's a little frustrating, and that he's probably frustrated and so forth. But it's you sounds a little tone deaf to me.
Yeah, he does.
Rather than just saying, listen, it is what it is. We're not playing very well. Just trust me, we'll get better. We need a little bit more practice time. These kids are young, but we're always young. But, there's no excuses. We're just going to keep playing. He chose not to.
Yeah, and again, like I said, that's kind of disappointing to me. It's not going back to talking about WKU and Louisville. Stansbury did not make any excuses
made
after the
none.
loss to Louisville.
He didn't.
I mean, he just said we did not play well, basically. I mean, he had no – you explained the reason why he didn't use any of that.
No.
I mean, he basically had a completely different tone than Calipari. And let us be honest, WKU's luxuries are not the same as Kentucky's in a given year.
That's correct.
And if there's – those coaches could complain a lot more, but they don't seem to be. And neither is Louisville's coach. He's not made any excuses. I mean, he's just – I mean, they've won their games, but, I mean, there's lots of things he could be complaining about right now.
Yep. Well,
And so it's just disappointing to have one of the coaches at one of the top programs in the nation spending his time when they're not playing well, not taking responsibility for it, I guess.
So yeah, I didn't like it's not unexpected, to be honest with you, because oftentimes when he talks to the media, he's actually talking to his players and fan base.
Yeah.
With that type of deal, but it didn't. I didn't buy it, so so we'll see. But Kentucky, by March they'll probably be 20-8, something like that. They'll be fine.
So they play Louisville in a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
in 2 weeks,
yeah.
I think it is. That'll be an interesting game, I think.
It will be. We'll see how many players Louisville has back, and but Kentucky, I mean, they got enough talent to get this turned around.
Oh yeah. All right, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the national championship game was on Saturday. I think people may have missed it. Some people didn't. It was between BYU and Coastal Carolina. Did you know that, John?
I did not know it was a national title game. No.
It may not have been.
But I did watch the game.
Okay. I thought it was a pretty fascinating way that whole situation worked out, because originally I had joked about this earlier in the football season that the Battle of the Unbeatens was supposed to happen Saturday between Liberty and Coastal Carolina. Unfortunately, Liberty lost a game by a couple of points earlier in the season, and then they were in COVID protocols, so they couldn't play Coastal Carolina on Saturday. And within a few hours, Coastal Carolina and BYU had arranged a game and played it on Saturday. Two unbeaten teams, which Coastal Carolina ended up winning the game by making a tackle at the 1 yard line, I guess is basically the way it worked out. And I just thought it was a fascinating it's one of those things, out of all the craziness of 2020, some of the things that have been most interesting have been some of the makeup games in high school football and in college football in this particular situation that wouldn't have happened in any other year.
No, and I give the credit to BYU.
Yeah.
The game was scheduled on Wednesday night, and BYU had to Coastal Carolina, both teams had to prepare for each other in the same amount of time. The difference is BYU had to fly across the country to play Coastal Carolina on that that short notice, which to me would make it so much more difficult.
Yeah.
And both teams felt like it was in their best interest to take this opportunities. They were both in the top 20, but none of them really had a realistic chance of moving up to even get into the playoffs without maybe a splash game. And because BYU's schedule had not been very good, no fault of them, they lost all their big name teams on their schedule this year, whether it's Notre Dame or whatever, because of the COVID. So they had to start from scratch, where everybody around them out west wasn't playing. They decided they was going to play.
Yeah.
So they got a lot of teams to play, but they did not really have a quality win. So I give them credit. They took a chance. They went over there and they came up a little bit short. But they rolled the dice, and I give them a credit for they could have stayed at home and just stayed 9-0 and played it safe, but they took that chance, and I thought they performed well and just came up a little short.
Yeah. I did find that whole situation interesting, and like you said, I mean, BYU could have just said no thanks, and they weren't going to move up into the playoffs without playing a game.
Yep.
So I mean, they were aware of that situation, and I do wonder if they maybe underestimated Coastal Carolina a little bit? I don't know because
I don't think so. I mean, they didn't have enough time to underestimate.
well,
I mean,
just in accepting the game in its own right, I guess.
I don't think so. I think they just jumped in and played. I mean, you couldn't play an SEC team. You couldn't play them because they have a policy of not to. ACC agreed to play one extra game against somebody else, but I think all those games were already up. The Big Ten's not playing anybody.
Right.
The Pac-10's not playing anybody. So the Pac-10, I'm sorry, they almost got a game with Washington, and that kind of fell through.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're kind of limited on what you can do.
Yeah. Well, and so Coastal Carolina won the game. I guess they are 10-0.
10-0. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they're not going to get a playoff slot either, and they're probably not going to get one of those.
No, but the coach is going to get a good coaching job somewhere.
Yeah, and I tell you, I mean, it's kind of fascinating. I mean, Coastal Carolina is not known for having a football program.
Well,
really.
they haven't because they haven't had a football program.
Yeah.
They just started it up about 15 years ago, I believe.
Yeah. And is this their third year playing at the highest level? I think it is, something
Probably.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably did what WKU did. They probably spent a season or two not playing, conference schedule or anything. And they are in the
Sun Belt.
Yeah, Sun Belt. And so anyway, it was. I thought it was just a fascinating arrangement that it worked out. And then for us around here, Kentucky finally found some offense. They beat up on South Carolina on Saturday, and South Carolina. This kind of leads us, and we'll come back to this, and this leads us to a discussion about Scott Satterfield here shortly. But they won that game. They may go play in the Liberty Bowl. I was looking just before we came back on air.
Who cares? I mean, I don't like bowls anyway.
Yeah.
But this year, what's Kentucky? What's their record? 4-6.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, 4-6.
And I looked at their wins. I know all 10 games were in the SEC, which makes it tough. I know that, but they beat Mississippi State, who's 2-6 and not very good. They beat Tennessee, who's 2-6. They beat Vandy, who's 0-8.
Yeah.
And they beat South Carolina, who's 2-8. And South Carolina only had 46 scholarship players that made it, and only 16. I'm sorry, they had 46 players that came, and they only had 16 defensive players.
Yeah.
That were on the roster when they played them.
Right.
I mean, okay. I mean, I'm just not a big fan. I'm just puzzled at these bowls. I mean, I know this year's different. They're taking teams with losing records, which they normally do. But to me, I wouldn't go to any bowl unless I think you got to make sure in this financial times that at least you're going to break even, right?
Well,
I mean, normally schools actually kind of lose money when they go to these bowl games.
Yeah, because, I mean, so far there's already been 11 bowl games canceled, and I'm sure there will be more canceled.
Yep.
I'm with you. There are too many bowl games. I mean, sometimes I like some of the second-tier, third-tier bowl games because you get to see a couple of programs you wouldn't get to see otherwise play.
I mean, I guess the school gets exposure for like on ESPN and things like that.
They may get exposure they weren't planning on this year.
Well, I mean, you can, but I don't think Kentucky football needs any more national exposure. So I don't know. They voted as a team to go. I think they were kind of mixed on whether or not they even want to play with a losing record. They voted to accept a bowl, but with the way Kentucky plays this year, which is, offensively, it's kind of hard to watch.
Yeah,
it doesn't really excite me.
Well, and here's another thing, and they
fired their 2 offensive coordinators today too.
Well, I mean, geez,
the same 2 that got them to 8 wins last year without a quarterback.
Who was it? Somebody fired their defensive coordinator in the NFL. Philadelphia, and I thought to myself, that's not your problem. I mean, I don't know what your problem is, but firing your defensive coordinator, firing your offensive coordinators at this particular point in time, I mean, it seems pointless, really.
I think it's a recruiting deal.
Probably.
I think he realized, even though it was remarkable how they won last year, it was not fun to watch, and they're going to have a hard time recruiting quarterbacks and receivers, and then they topped it off this year with probably with a worse performance. Well, and I think, even though the coordinators did a great job of somehow surviving last year with a successful year, I just think probably Stoops felt like they had to change it just for recruiting and culture and so forth.
Well, I think it's basically what you said last week. I mean,
though I don't know if Stoops wants their coordinators to throw it 40 to 50 times a game either.
And that kind of leads me to, I'm not so sure it was Stoops' decision, so to speak.
Yep.
It may have been, you got to do this or else kind of situation on the recruiting front. Meanwhile, WKU closed out its regular season playing a Sunday game against Charlotte. They beat up on Charlotte pretty good in that game overall. Got some younger players in there who got some exposure. They've had people transferring out. They've lost, I think, 2 quarterbacks.
And one of them showed up to be the backup still. Thomas, he's in the portal, but he's still on the team. I just think it's fascinating to me.
Yes, so many odd things in 2020.
I'm in the transfer portal, but I'll still go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they said to him, hey, look, man, we don't have anybody else. Can you just at least come over here and hold the clipboard for us in case something happens?
That's incredible.
Yeah, and then Louisville has 1 game left with Wake Forest. Now, this gets us back to the Satterfield thing because
he's messed this up.
Yes, he has.
He's taken people don't know, he sort of, kind of, not officially, kind of unofficially interviewed with South Carolina. He calls it was a conversation, not an interview.
Yeah, well.
And the problem is he said earlier that he was not going to do it, and then come to find out that he actually met with them. And if you're a Louisville fan, you have been burned in the past with this, Bobby Petrino, to say the least.
Yeah, I wasn't on that plane to Auburn.
And he and Satterfield's had so much goodwill.
Yes.
He did such a good job last year, and kind of such a soft-spoken, seems like a nice person, and, he's built a great culture in just 2 years in family, and it just kind of seems like a little bit of a stab in the back, a little bit, not real honest. And these football coaches need to figure this out, and fans need to figure this out. These football coaches are always looking for their next job for the most part.
Yeah.
That's just what they do. And but the football coaches can help. Now, that what the coaches are, they're worried about it hurts the recruiting, that if they don't get that job that they're seeking, then, they're going to lose recruits coming to their place. And but I think a better situation would be just be honest.
Yeah.
Hey, it's good to be wanted, and I'm always going to, I'm always going to at least have an open mind. And I had a conversation, I had an interview, but I want to stay here. Just be honest.
Mentioning the recruits, I mean, it would seem to me, instead of selling the recruits on we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and loyalty and blah, 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 or whatever their sales pitch is about coming to Louisville or any university, I mean, the explanation is real simple on the coach's side. As you said, it's good to be wanted. I mean, basically, a coach is being recruited as well by a different program very often, all the time, every year.
Especially when you're in a position like you're in Louisville.
Yeah.
Where it's not seen as the ultimate job.
Right.
The warning to Louisville football coaches, though, is that most people who have left Louisville to go to quote-unquote better jobs have not been successful.
Yeah,
Charlie Strong, who went to Texas and failed miserably, got fired. Bobby Petrino, who went to Arkansas, failed and got fired. You better be careful, because Louisville can be, and I still think is, a good job, ACC, and it gives you an opportunity to play in eventually in a Final Four playoffs. Lamar Jackson had them at the very top.
Yeah.
His junior year, they were top 5 in the country. People, you shouldn't forget that.
I'm with you on that. I think I don't think Louisville is a top-tier job in terms of exposure and how the world sees it. But then again, neither was Clemson before Dabo Swinney got there.
I agree. And I think it's a better job in South Carolina.
Absolutely a better job in South Carolina, because you cannot compete right now in the state of South Carolina against Clemson, because your recruiting base is not big enough. And you're not going to get the best in-state talent away from what Swinney's doing.
Or Georgia, for that.
Or Georgia, yeah. Well, I mean, look, you still got Florida State nosing around in South Carolina.
Yep.
You probably have Florida nosing around in South Georgia and South Carolina. I'm with you. I think you can stay at Louisville and recruit better. You can do what Petrino did in a lot of ways and find those diamonds in the rough out of Florida.
Yep.
But also, you can recruit Ohio and Indiana.
You can. Now, the only difference is I think South Carolina paid $1 million more a year. And that has to be, I'm sure, a factor. And he's from that area down there, too. So, I mean, he had all those things. And if he just said that, I'm going to listen. I'm from that area, blah, blah, blah. Just say it rather than hide it. And I think he's a good guy. I think he's a great guy. One of the best people that I don't know him, but my perception of him from a football coach, a lot of the football coaches are kind of full of crap, in my opinion. But he does appear to be genuine, and that just it went kind of against, I think, the perception of him. That's the trouble.
Here's, I guess, what I hope comes out of this situation for him, because, to be honest, also, this is the first time he's been in this position. He was at App State for 10 years, I think it was, and probably had no real designs.
Well, it was understandable. Go to App State to an ACC team after so many years. That's understandable.
Yeah.
Louisville to South Carolina seems, at best, a lateral move.
Yeah.
At best.
I mean, the romance of the SEC is awfully powerful.
It is,
as we have seen, coaching in that conference.
Well, money. It's the highest paid conference in the country.
Well, and it gets a lot more exposure overall across the conference for football than the ACC does.
It does,
and maybe Satterfield feels like that's where he can go and really make a name for himself, unlike at Louisville. But I'm with you. I don't necessarily agree with his. I don't agree with his approach. I hope he changes his approach, and I hope that doesn't come back to bite him in the recruiting process as well.
I agree.
But it could.
It could.
All right, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the basketball season was originally supposed to start November 23rd. Obviously, it did not.
High school.
Yes, high school. And now it's supposed to start January 4th, but next Monday they are supposed to be able to return to practice. They've not been able to practice since the last KHS meeting, which was before November 23rd. Whatever, the week before that. I don't remember, 15th, 18th, whatever that date was that they met. So they're meeting again this Thursday, December 10th at 10 a.m., I believe it is. And we'll have some coverage of that on 104thescore.com and on our Twitter and Facebook, so you'll be able to find some info about that as it's going on. Basically the point of this particular meeting is to revisit the decisions they made about the start of the season and about the end of the season and that kind of thing for winter sports, to see whether they're going to back up. They're going to back up the start of the season, let them come back to practice, all that kind of stuff. Just my gut feeling is that they're not going to change anything as it's set up right now, with the possible exception of going ahead and expanding the basketball season to end in April, which was one of the options on the table when they voted in November, was to either let it end when it usually does in March with the state tournaments, or to wait until April, which is another window open at Rupp Arena where they could have the state tournaments. And I just think that there's been a lot of discussion about that shortened season. Of course, that also then leads into the challenge of your overlapping winter sports and start of your spring sports there, John.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I know, and I don't know, the one thing I'm fairly confident in is there's going to be a basketball season.
Yeah.
Will it still start January 4th? I think it's 50-50, to be honest with you. I mean, I could see them, again, moving it back one more time. But, and again, I'm okay if they move it back one more time as long as they have a full season.
Yeah.
As long as they move it on the backside and do the same thing with spring sports, because spring sports by far deserve their season. They lost everything last year.
Right.
So you got to protect that. I don't know, when they vote Thursday, really, the situation in the state in terms of COVID is arguably worse than it was 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. It's certainly not better.
No.
The good news is vaccines are on the way. It's not going to get to the people. It's going to go to healthcare workers and and nursing home and things like that. So I don't know how that really affects athletics for the first month or so.
Right.
I'm just quite confident they're definitely going to play. When, I think it's a little bit up in the air, and how, even if they allow it on January 4th, but my concern is how many games can you get in, just because of shutdowns and quarantines and so forth. That's the only thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing, which is kind of why I just felt like they should have just gone ahead and started the season and just deal with the scheduling aspect as it goes through. And I do think that they probably could cut back on the number of games played during a week or whatever, that kind of thing, to allow some more flexibility. So instead of playing, I mean, right now, basically, a lot of basketball schools, you know, your boys and your girls total may play 5 out of 7 days. You know, I mean, they may not play all at the same time, but you may have 2 or 3 girls games and 2 or 3 boys games during the course of a week.
Well, I think the philosophy with some of the coaches I've talked to is that they're going to schedule as many games as they can. Just because of it's almost like scheduling baseball and softball in the spring, where you overschedule because you're going to get rained out, you're going to lose games.
Yeah,
I think they're going to schedule as many games as possible, knowing they're going to lose games.
Right.
They're going to be games in which other schools are going to cancel on them, and there's probably going to be a high chance that you're going to have to cancel some yourself.
Yeah. I guess what I'm looking at, though, is this situation in terms of, like, dealing with gym capacity and the limited number of people that you could have at the game. And so with the requirements for cleaning and all of these things from day to day, I feel like that has an impact on how many games you can actually get in, even if you schedule the maximum amount.
Well, maybe so. I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know how much – I don't know. I just, you know, I don't know how much cleaning a gym has any effect on anything. I'll be honest with you. You know, I'm big in the mask and things like that. I don't know how that really works. I want people to be able to watch them. I would love for family members. I want to watch my niece play.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is I just want her to play. So if nobody comes and they get to play, that's better than nothing.
Yeah, I guess that's my thing is what level of sacrifice are people actually willing to make in order for the season to be played? Like if you basically can't have anybody in the gym other than the teams and the referees and the coaches.
It's better than nothing.
Yes, and if you want them to play, then that's what you deal with for as long as you have to deal with it, I think. And if that means that allows them to start on January 4th with it severely limited capacity, because as we've talked about already, there's no information necessarily that there's been team-to-team transfers of the virus, but there is quite a bit of information related to a bunch of people in a room together getting it.
That's true, and the problem at the college and the professional areas, it's a lot easier to, in my opinion, to administer these games.
Yeah.
At the local high school level, it's harder to ask school officials and things like that to be the mask police on people.
Right.
And 90% of the people actually do what you ask them to do and do that because they think it's in the best interest of the kids. But, you know, you're always run into those situations where you got people who don't. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason. But we're going to get a season. How it looks, I'm not really for sure, and we'll just have to wait to see what happens Thursday and let the rumors and speculation take care of itself, because I don't think I'm not for sure if they know, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, we found out at the last meeting, right before or the day before the last meeting, there was a frame of mind that was different than what they actually voted to approve on the day of the meeting. So you're right. That morning discussion that they will have amongst themselves will have an impact on what they vote on and how it looks. But I'm with you. We'll have a basketball season, whatever they have to do to get it in, and also preserve the spring seasons for those players, especially, you know, the juniors who will be seniors this year who missed everything last year. I hate it for the seniors from last year, but whatever they can do, I hope we can all figure out how to say thank you, I guess, in the end. All right, it's Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.